Before the Clean Air Act was in place, we literally had cities that you could be in and you could look up and not see the sun.
You saw the cars smelling terrible, and so the pollution was a visceral experience.
We know that long-term low-level exposure to polluted air is unhealthy.
1969 was the year of the landing on the moon. You had sort of a collective attitude.
Surely we can move confidently now to achieve a better, more peaceful life for our fellow humans.
Action to clean things up may have begun in Washington on this Earth Day.
There are few pieces of legislation that affect everything you do all day, like breathe.
Whenever there were efforts to change, roll back, stop advances, environmental protection, it has been the health issue that has rallied people.
If it's about you, your family, your kids, you will demand that the federal government step up.
It's a human right to breathe clean air, and that right is being violated right
now. We have implored DuPont to at least reach what EPA says is a safe level. They have refused to do it.
Neighbors near the Clairton Coke Works showing just how frustrated they are.
Who is tracking our health and what system is in place?
There's a problem in Clairton, but there's a problem all around this area because this pollution travels.
It takes government at the federal and the state level. It takes business and industry throughout the country, and it takes citizens pushing in the right direction.
Alright, so I hope everyone enjoyed the film, and we are going to get started with our panel discussion. Our facilitator for tonight is Sarah O'Keefe. Sarah leads the Mayor's Office of Sustainability in the City of Cleveland, directing sustainability and climate justice initiatives and a staff of passionate sustainability leaders. As a part of Mayor Bibb's cabinet, Sarah is currently working with peers to evaluate, update, and establish priorities in circular economy, transforming energy, transportation, land use, and other resource-intensive systems at the local and regional levels in the pursuit of equitable solutions to climate change and other environmental issues facing the greater Cleveland community. A specific 2023 priority for the city will be the scoping of a regional decarbonization framework that is centered in equity, is inclusive of nature-based climate solutions, and will help better quantify climate action goals to reach science-based targets. So we really appreciate Sarah being here tonight.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me. And thanks to the Division of Air Quality and the outreach team for inviting me to be a part of this panel. I'm going to invite our panelists to come up on stage and find a seat. And maybe panelists, after you sit down, we'll have you do your introductions. Does that make sense? So I'm gonna first, Whitney, if you don't mind, because we're going to go in order. So Whitney, please. And then we have Stephanie McCarroll. I'm gonna ask them to introduce themselves, so don't worry, you'll learn more about all of these passionate people in just a moment. Tracy Sabetta, and then we have Brian Mallory and Katie Moore. And then I'm gonna sit on the end. Okay. And I did miscount. I put my own chair down, so now we're gonna get another one. Hang on. This is beautiful. Right here is perfect. Yeah. We can be real close. I won't fall off, I promise. I know that one of my passionate colleagues over here can come rescue me. Right, Kathy? Okay. That's your other duties as assigned. Okay, so we heard a lot in that movie. Thank you for your attention. I really enjoyed it. It's my second viewing. It was great. But I'm going to go to the panelists and ask each one of you, very passionate individuals who could probably speak for an entire hour about your passion, to just briefly say your name and something about what brought you here and your organization, if you would. And we'll start with Whitney and come on down this way.
Hi, everyone. My name is Whitney Long-Jones. I'm the Director of Community Engagement for Ohio City Incorporated, which is a community development corporation. And as the Director of Community Engagement, my role is really to do our best to provide resources, connect individuals to each other, residents, small businesses in Ohio City, and improve quality of life as best we can. So I'll be quick, you're looking at me. With the project that I'm focusing on currently, which we'll get into, is air quality. That is the project that I'm leading and have been very passionate about for the last 5.5 years.
Whitney, you did an awesome job. Everybody, follow Whitney's example. Thank you. Now we're going to really get into it with the audience, so please do give Whitney a round of applause.
My name is Stephanie McCarroll. I am a nurse clinical coordinator at the Cleveland Clinic here with the Community Lung Clinic. My passion is I take care of asthma patients, patients with airway diseases. Air quality is very important because as I have been pursuing higher education and really studying a lot about asthma, is our urban neighborhoods that asthma affects the most, and it's the education I would like to get out to the community so we can understand the importance of lung health and what we need to do to get our communities back to better health. Thank you.
Hi there, my name is Tracy Sabetta. I represent Moms Clean Air Force. We're a national organization with chapters in 14 states across the country. We have 1 million members nationwide and about 90,000 members here in Ohio. I live in Columbus now, but we're born and raised in Ashtabula, Ohio, so a lot of love for Northeast Ohio. Moms works at the local, state, and federal level on policy that helps to reduce these emissions that we heard so much about in the film, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the things that are going on at all three of those levels right now.
Good evening. My name is Brian Mallory. I'm representing the Ohio Poor People's Campaign. We are one of 46 states in the district of the Poor People's Campaign National Call for Moral Revival. We are a revival of Dr. King's original campaign in 1968, and we work to organize folks at the nexuses of the 5 interlocking evils of systemic poverty, racism, environmental degradation, militarism, and the false moral narrative of religious nationalism. So being that I live in a neighborhood that directly affected by this, I wasn't born here, but 2 generations deep in Cleveland, and asthma is an ongoing concern with not only myself, my mom, I've passed it to my millennial, and I've lived in a couple of these communities that have been in the meeting. So I'm just thrilled to be here, and looking forward to the solutions and the conversation that we have.
Hi everyone, I'm Katie Moore. I'm with the Northeast Ohio Area-Wide Coordinating Agency, which is the federally designated metropolitan planning organization for the region. We do transportation planning and we fund transportation projects within the region, but I am here as the manager of environmental planning on behalf of our air quality group. And what we want to do is we want to reduce mobile emissions in order to clean the air and hopefully get our region out of non-attainment for ozone.
Thank you, everybody. Excellent job. We can get to some questions and some reactions. So the reason why I was asking for brevity is that we really want to get to the content of the film that we just watched and some initial reactions from our panelists, and also thinking about you in the audience, if you could think about what, I'm sure you all had reactions in, that you might want to share, or some questions you might want to share or ask some of our panelists. So this film really moved quite a bit from the history of the Clean Air Act. It went to some very in-depth community focus areas. It talked about especially concerned citizens of St. John's Parish. I thought that was really powerful. There's a lot to think about in this. Specifically in 1970-1990, the Clean Air Act and Clean Air Act amendments were both passed with overwhelming bipartisan support. I think that's a little bit different right about now. So these are things for us to think about. Before we get to some questions, though, I would love to hear any initial reactions from any of the panelists that you might want to share when you either viewed this again today or in a previous instance, any initial reactions when you first viewed this film that you might want to share with our audience?
I was amazed. As I said, my grandparents, my parents are Cleveland natives. I have lived half of my 60 years, mostly in the adult years here in this town. To have Cleveland prominently there, Pittsburgh, another community that I've spent significant time and lived in, and then I was born in the D.C. Baltimore area, and the fight of the kids down there, I remember that vividly. So I just was struck that this film kind of is on the edges of my life in more ways than I was comfortable with initially. And now I find myself working for the Poor People's Campaign, and as you can see in the movie, overwhelmingly it is low wealth, poor communities, and communities of color that suffer the toughest and the most severe effects of this kind of policy planning. So that came through loud and clear.
Anyone else want to share any reactions or the thoughts?
I'll just say, as I said earlier, I did grow up in Ashtabula, and we were the chemical industry capital for a while. And my father actually worked for Diamond Shamrock, which was also Occidental Chemical. And I'm reminded in looking at that of the kinds of things that we went through with, there were the advisories when not to go to the beaches, not to get in the water, not to go outside because there were emissions that day that were too high, and knowing that he was working right in the middle of all of that too. And then also to keep in mind, though, if you look at where we've come from those days, that in Ohio our air quality is actually 75% better, 75% less emissions than it was 30 years ago. But we have so far left to go. So we're on the right track, and some of the policies that they talked about made a tremendous difference, but we're not quite there yet in Ohio.
I think after I saw the video, it kind of circled around and put things in perspective of asthma. And I think that when I worked as an ICU nurse and I had the opportunity to work for the asthma center, I had no idea of the severity of asthma. So after I looked at the video and really saw how, air pollution, air quality makes asthma more severe, makes more exacerbations. We spend more money in healthcare dollars when the solution is let's just clean up the air, and also how much work we need to really do for our communities to really get those clean air, get that information out so we can, have children not miss so many school days, so many parents have to call off work, and adults miss so much work because of their asthma is flaring.
Thank you everybody for that. Any if you want to jump in, go for the mic. We have one. No, you're good for right now. Okay. So thank you for sharing those initial reactions. And one of the things I also wanted to think about that they mentioned, and there's the impact of global events on U.S. policy and action. So I thought it was really interesting how some of the actions didn't happen during the Reagan administration, in particular in this film, until something happened in India. And then the sister plant was in Virginia. And then health is really the call to action. And youth is really the call to action that came loud and clear for me in this. But I think another thing that came out loud and clear, especially on the policy side where we started with the Clean Air Act, is that they said the genius of the Clean Air Act is for the first time, and you had to establish scientifically what measure of health was for each contaminant without regard to cost or technology. And that was a big departure, and it had bipartisan support. And as I mentioned, it feels a little bit different environment right now. So 1970, 1990, the Clean Air Act and the Clean Air Act amendments both passed. From your perspective, and anyone please jump in on this, this is a question for the panelists. You're all part of different organizations that are advancing cleaner air in one way or another. What suggestions do you have for how we might remind people that clean air is a shared value historically, supported by both parties politically? All kinds of people benefit from clean air, and that everyone should care about protecting the air we breathe, regardless of whatever affiliation they might have. So what suggestions do you have for how we can remind people and tell that story? Any thoughts come to mind from your own organizations?
So one of the things that we're working toward is controlling the narrative around environmental protection, making it speak to that individual person, what they value, what they want to protect, what they want to preserve. And what we're finding is there's always something that ties clean air, clean water to someone's personal experience. So it's reaching out and figuring out what that is in order to have them create value around that resource and the importance of the cleanliness of that resource. And everyone has something, but it's being open to what that is and letting it be different than yours.
Yeah, so definitely piggybacking off of that, you touched on a couple of points that I was going to mention, but it's really to understanding the historical social barriers that are put in place. So even though these acts were passed, how beneficial are they to everyone on a whole, as a whole? You know, if industrial organizations are still allowed to be placed within vicinity of where people live, how just is it? I mean, so just getting to the bottom of that. So I think it's education, I think it's awareness, I think it's being realistic about the fact that everybody goes through something. So how can everyone come to the table to really talk about that and be respectful of everyone else's experience? So starting the dialogue and keeping it going.
Yeah, Katie touched on something that's near and dear to our heart in the campaign. We believe that you have to change the narrative. And we also believe, because we are very political, but we are nonpartisan, that we have to make America understand that both parties are complicit in the errors and both parties are part of the solution. And it was kind of funny, you framed it in the positive. Some of the strongest support that we have in the Poor People's Campaign are the folks that are in Cancer Alley. And every time we have a national gathering, I weep and mourn because there's usually somebody that's not there that has crossed over. Maryland is another strong state. West Virginia, oh my goodness, those poor folks. And we are here in Ohio, and we suffer the same challenges. But yeah, it begins with making that connection and letting everybody know we all have a shared part in this, because we all are either immediate family or just removed, have someone that is directly affected by these issues. And again, we also have to recognize that we have the ability collectively to hold our electeds and accountable and appointeds accountable for their policy choices. If they reflect the will, and we put it in moral and ethical terms, a budget is a reflection of what our society values. So we frame it in those terms, and that begins with changing the narrative.
Just to add real quick, the one thing that we have found at Moms Clean Air Force is that children make fantastic messengers. We have launched campaigns where kids will draw a picture of what clean air looks like to them, what their future looks like to them, what clean energy looks like to them, and then deliver those to the offices of U.S. senators, members of Congress, the Ohio State House, because you can counter arguments on how many jobs are going to be added through clean energy or reducing emissions. You can counter the cost of cleaning up facilities, but you can't counter the health argument when kids who have asthma come in and tell you what their days look like, what it is that they are missing out on, what it is that they hope to do that they're not able to do because it may be a bad air quality day that day. So they don't go to their soccer games, they don't play t-ball that day. And it's very difficult, regardless of your party, to look at a child and say, I don't care about that. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that they always vote the way that we want them to do, but they hear it. And little by little, there are some differences that can be made that way, because we're really asking people to look at this issue as a human being and as a parent instead of through their party ideology.
Hand it over to Whitney for a minute, because I think that I'm just going to pick up some themes here. So changing the narrative is very important, the way that we speak about things and being able to connect to people where they are, but also recognizing the shared, you guys did a great job answering this question, by the way, the shared history and the shared benefits. But I think it is really important to underline again that it's not equal for how people have benefited from these acts. And that youth are really, health and youth are a call for action, and they're hard to counter with, well, I don't care about health and I don't care about kids. That's a bit tough. But we still have challenges ahead of us, and I want to learn more, and the audience wants to as well, about your specific programs and projects. So starting with Whitney, can you describe the community air quality monitoring program called Let's Clear the Air, and what ways can residents in the Ohio City community become involved with the project?
Absolutely. So when I started with Ohio City Incorporated in late 2017, the first project that was, well, one of the projects that was brought to my attention was, well, not even a project, but one of the issues in the community was the poor air quality, and how in Ohio City in general, but more concentrated near Lakeview Estates, which is a CMHA property, Cuyahoga Metropolitan Housing Authority. So low-income residents, living in within proximity of the industries on the near the Cuyahoga River that bring in sand, ground stone, things of that sort, that type of cargo. So Let's Clear the Air started in 2021 after we had done a couple of years of awareness and engagement with the residents in that area, and tried to do quite a few things to really just connect with the residents and find out what their thought was, what their lived experience was, what they were going through on a daily basis. So when I say that these residents live within proximity of these industries, we're talking 100 feet from really huge ground mounds of stone. And on a dry or windy day, particulate matter in the area kicks up and comes into, and it's a heavily populated senior living facility, so elderly homes with breathing problems, respiratory issues, folks who have these issues that did not have them until they moved into Lakeview. And you were talking about asthma, children being born with asthma, dust on cars. You go outside after a windy day and you swipe your finger across the window and you see it. You go down into the area and you start coughing. You can't see what's in the air, but you can feel it. And it's really unsettling. So what Let's Clear the Air is doing is creating a space for residents and stakeholders, including these industries, to really start a dialogue on how we can address this issue. So the industries have been invited to the table so that we're not demonizing those organizations in a way without getting their perspective, and again, like Brian was saying, holding them accountable and working together to find a solution. So part of the issue is, unfortunately, these industries are operating within their permitting rights, which means that they're allowed to emit a certain level of particulate matter into the air annually. It would be helpful if the industries tarped these ground mounds of rock or wet them down on a regular basis, but they're not required to, as much as they should, which would be helpful when we're thinking of public health and the residents that live next to these organizations. So how can we work together to find a solution? What it really boils down to is fundraising, and just being quite frank, we live in a capitalistic society. Money. If we can help the organization come up with funding to either relocate or a way to put up some of the, like a living wall of sorts, instead of just the metal fencing, something that looks aesthetically pleasing to the residents and something that helps to mitigate the poor air quality, even if it's on a short-term basis. We're working on what that looks like long-term, but in the meantime, the purpose of the air quality sensors is to gather that data and present to City of Cleveland to sort of streamline the process of changing policy when it comes to permitting rights for industries in the area. So there are awesome organizations that NOACA that provide air quality data on a regular basis, but we need the data. It's more regionalized with the way City of Cleveland collects that information and NOACA. So we would like to collect data central or specific to the Lakeview region and show the difference between what Lakeview is experiencing and what the rest of the City of Cleveland is experiencing, and also the other counties that NOACA monitors. So that's kind of where we are right now. We just installed the sensors, and for the next year, we're going to be monitoring them and making sure that we understand what conditions promote more a worse air quality day over others. And hopefully, in the 3-year process that we've outlined for this, we can come up with ways to work together with the industries to reduce the poor air quality.
Thank you for that. And one of the things that I heard in your response also was, while we have the narrative, you had both, right? You had the narrative of the stories of the people that are being affected, and you also have the data that will then convince others to also act. So you don't have just the narrative, you have both, and that sounds really impactful and powerful. Thank you for that. Stephanie, I have a question for you. As you are likely aware, Cleveland has very high smoking rates among its adult population. I'm just asking, what are some services that the Respiratory Institute provides to help Clevelanders reduce or to quit smoking that you might want to talk about and share here today?
So to start, my physician mentor, Dr. Shumita Khatri, who has just recently moved on from Cleveland Clinic to work on a larger scale to be able to reach more people, I have learned under her about the smoking initiatives. First, Cleveland Clinic, we have a smoking cessation program that anyone is more than welcome to join. That information is on our website. We have the numbers on our table. We also will be working with the American Lung Association. We do work with the American Lung Association for different smoking cessation initiatives. One that Dr. Khatri did talk about before she left the clinic that I reconnected with the American Lung Association is to, stand outside of those stores that sell the cigarettes and say, hey, are you interested in to stop smoking? We have the information right here. So trying to meet the community a little bit more where they are. And also our smoking cessation program, we have different coordinators, nurses. Dr. Choi, he is the program head of that program to really try to get people to move away from smoking. And that is actually part of the air quality that affects asthma, it causes lung cancer, it causes COPD, it causes a number of different disease processes in the body. So we have a big smoking cessation program for whomever would like to join us.
Thank you for that. And I think that for connecting also the asthma, I know the film itself didn't talk about smoking, but that puts you it's another risk and an air quality concern also. So thank you for sharing that, Stephanie, and for offering those resources. And for Tracy, speaking of asthma, rates are abnormally high in the city of Cleveland, as you well know. Some statistics argue they are nearly 3 times the national average of 8% for pediatric patients ages 5 to 17 years of age, which means that some neighborhoods in Cleveland face asthma rates of up to 26%. Could you offer some ways that parents can help improve their children's asthma, or some campaigns that Mom's Clean Air Force rallies around, and how can residents get involved?
Sure, absolutely. Just going back to talking about the American Lung Association, their State of the Air report for 2023 was just issued 2 weeks ago. And that is something that we analyze and look over very quickly as soon as it's issued. And what I can tell you for Cuyahoga County is that 1/10 of all pediatric asthma cases are in Cuyahoga County. There are 88 counties in Ohio, and yet 10% of the cases are in one county alone. So those numbers for Cleveland do hold true. Communities of color have skyrocketing cases of asthma. It is, going back to sort of the overarching theme is that improvements and, we have seen improvements in air quality, but it's not equal across the board. And that is one place where we really see disparities is in the asthma rates, and also with hospital admissions from asthma, emergency room visits from asthma. The outcomes from asthma are worse in communities of color as well. Asthma is mostly hereditary, but it also can come from exposure, and that's exposure to a lot of different sources of air pollution. Allergies can also trigger asthma attacks because the same types of things that are triggering that inflammation in your lungs can come from allergies the same way as it can from air pollution. So we always tell parents, don't just track the bad air quality days, but look at high pollen days as well. And there are so many triggers. Smoking, indoor smoking especially, is one to watch that triggers asthma. Medications can actually trigger asthma, so be very upfront with your physicians about what medications your children are taking. But going back to sort of tonight's theme of air pollution is that we don't see air pollution. It's not something normally. Not anymore. You don't necessarily look outside and say, oh, it looks like a bad air pollution day. But that doesn't mean that the impact isn't being felt by those vulnerable populations. And those are, children and the elderly and those in low-income communities. So it's something that you have to be vigilant about if you have an asthmatic child. Moms Clean Air Force, we do a lot of work on, as I mentioned, at the policy level to try to reduce those emissions, especially from fossil fuel plants, from the transportation sector. We don't do as many local programs as we do looking to change policy for the largest number of people possible. For example, in the last 24 hours or so, maybe a little more than that, I testified virtually before the US EPA on the heavy-duty truck rule that the US EPA is putting out there to try to reduce emissions. 27% of all emissions come from the transportation sector. And of that, 58% of it is from cars. I mean, just the cars that we drive every day. And as you know, Ohio is woefully behind when it comes to public transit. So we have got a bottleneck of cars that are sitting idling and are just spewing toxics all over the place and increasing the asthma rates of our children in Ohio. So we urge everyone to, whether it's your local city council, to talk to them about how you want to see your city invest in more clean energy opportunities for the city or increase green space for your community, or if you want to talk to those at the state level who can look at incentives for electric vehicles so the darn things aren't quite so expensive right now, or they can improve the charging infrastructure. Or you can look at the federal, where we've actually seen some climate policies introduced in the last 6 months. But regardless, these elected officials need to know that people want to see this policy change, because they are not going to put themselves out there right now if they don't think that it's what people want and that it's not going to help them stay in office or stay popular. So it's important to offer them cover, and it's important to talk to them about why this is important and what it is that you want to see at the local, state, and federal levels.
Thank you for that. And then Brian, and I'm not even going to go into all the federal dollars that are available right now and how we're going to do that, but you can ask me that question later. Brian, even if indirectly, how is the Poor People's Campaign involved for the fight for healthy air, and how can residents potentially get involved with that?
Wow. I just wanted to thank the previous panelists. You reminded me of what my pulmonologist talks to me about. And yes, I was a childhood asthmatic, and in my mid-40s, I thought I had grown out of it, and it came back roaring. And I suffer from allergies, so yes, all that, like I said, sound like a pulmonologist. And Whitney, the initiative that you're doing is fantastic, but it comes to what we work on too. We work at the State House level at Columbus, and we focus on Washington, D.C. But the third part, changing the narrative and getting it, but there's a third connection there, and I'm going to be that guy that mentions it. You have to have your facts, you have to do the research, but you also have to have some good lawyers in there. You have to be willing to take this where it needs to go sometimes. And we don't talk a lot about that in the campaign, but that is something that we know is to be the reality of changing policies in this country at the federal and the state level. It's got to be fact-based, and as I said, you have to make it connect to individuals, make it matter. Go where they go, do what they do, connect their cause to your cause, and that stuff. So But I'm sorry, I'm wandering a little bit.
You're fine. How would a resident potentially get involved in what you're doing?
Okay, Poor People's Campaign. We have two co-chairs. Reverend Dr. William J. Barber II is probably the best known. He is head of Repairs of the Breach, and our other national co-chair is the Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris, who is head of Kairos Center. Those are the two national nonprofit organizations that provide a very loose framework for the state Poor People's Campaign. Each state, I might add, is run by their coordinating committees, which are citizens like everybody in this room who have given of their time. We are all volunteers. We do not get paid. You can reach us at www.poorpeoplescampaign.org. That is the national portal that will direct you to Ohio. We have a pretty big presence on Facebook here regionally, Cleveland area, Northeast Ohio, or the state page. And our next big thing is our Moral Action Congress. We have this every 4 years. We will be down in DC June 18th through the 22nd, where we will be actually living through doing what Dr. King did in the original Poor People's Campaign, which is walking the halls of Congress, meeting with the Congress and the Senate and those members of the administration, and having our members who are most affected tell these stories. It is amazing when you are in these rooms and these people that you see on the Sunday morning talking shows say things like, I've never actually talked to someone who's lived through this. I've been in policy all my adult life, and I've never sat in the room with a poor person or a low-wage worker who's struggling to make ends meet. These are very much, sometimes to these people, academic abstract concepts. And we are most effective when we can put a face on it.
Telling the story face to face.
Not just that, but putting a face on it. And that, Reverend Barber likes to say that, because we are a moral fusion movement and we like to organize across lines of apparent difference, you will see people that you normally would not see together who are arm in arm siblings loving on each other, because we want everybody to know it makes no difference where you live. Here in Ohio, because we have a supermajority of one party and they like to play urban versus rural, we just have a saying we adopted from Kentucky and West Virginia, from the hoods to the hollers. People everywhere want the same thing. They want to live, they want to thrive, they want to feel that they're passing on a future to their children and their children's children. If you live somewhere where that is not your reality, come on and join us.
Thank you for that. That is quite an invitation. And as somebody who grew up kind of close to a holler and now lives in a more urban setting, I totally appreciate that going across. Thank you. And Katie, we know that fossil fuels from mobile sources contributes a great deal to the particulate matter in the air. Can you provide some reasonable steps that residents can take, and not just residents, but all of us can take, organizations can take, I would add in there, to reduce our reliance on cars? We were just hearing about the 58% of emissions are from cars. Lots of heavy transport as well, but also cars. So what can residents, organizations do about that?
Well, the first thing you can do is reflect. Consider how lucky you are if you have transportation choices. And then NOACA has some tools that you can utilize in order to change your behaviors. We have our Ohio Commute platform, which helps you to share your car with others who may need a ride, who have unreliable transportation, or they're not in the same situation as you to be as lucky to have their own personal vehicle to get them to and from work or to and from the store. We also do have amazing infrastructure within this region for biking and transit. It's not everywhere, but everyone can reflect and figure out what options are available to you. And then give it a try. Challenge yourself. Why not? If you track it, you'll learn the impacts that you had on air quality immediately. If you track it on our Ohio Commute app, it'll tell you your CO2 savings, your methane savings, your dollar savings. Do it over
I'm going to
here.
interrupt because it also tells you your calories. So,
It also tells you your calories. Get healthy.
Just saying.
Try it out. And if you don't have the transportation options that you need in order to live your life the way you need to, talk to your employer. There are employer benefits for transportation management where they could potentially run carpools, van pools, shuttles to try to help you have that reliable transportation option that doesn't require you to have your own car. So I would encourage you to empower yourself with that knowledge and bring that to your employer. The other thing I will say, we don't just want you to not drive your car. We want you to minimize the amount of driving that you're doing. So maybe you do need to take your car to go to the grocery store. You do need to take your car to go to the doctor. What we're hoping is that you can just make small changes that lower the amount of time that you're driving, lower the amount of miles that you're traveling. Also, keep your car maintained if you can. Keep those tires inflated. Get your car to the mechanic on time so that we're not having these byproducts of your car needing to be serviced. Consider the type of fuel that you use and the way that you drive. Those are all kind of within the realm of reach. And if you are a champion for this, give up your car. You don't need it. Really, think about the way you live your life. Try to use public transport. Get on your bike. Use your 2 feet and get around if you can. If you're that privileged, go ahead and do it.
All right, thank you. Definitely some individual actions that you can take. And I would just add for the organizational side of things, having been, and I apologize to all of the other panelists, I'm the most familiar with GoHio Commute because I used to be the person at my organization that did it and organized it. But it was a great tool for an organization as well, so you can ask your employer or your community to think about that. We're doing that at the city, actually, too, so stay tuned. So one of the things that is really concerning about transportation in particular and those emissions, and I'm just going to take it to what's called the ground level ozone. I just want to pause a minute on that. We are in a non-attainment zone area again for ground level ozone. So when you hear about ozone in the atmosphere, it's great. It gets depleted from climate change, but when it's up in the atmosphere, it's great. It protects us. However, when it's at the ground level, it actually harms human health, and a lot of it is generated through transportation emissions. So that is another immediate benefit to reducing our transportation emissions. When we have high-level ozone days, that's one of the factors that you can look up and see. It really impacts all of us, actually, but especially those who have health concerns. The youngest, the most vulnerable, the chronically ill, and those who have a chronic illness. One thing I would say, so my role at the city is the Director of Sustainability and Climate Justice. I was a sustainability director somewhere else at a couple different hospitals. The climate justice part is the part that got me to the city of Cleveland because I really believe what all of these wonderful people have talked about already and what was emphasized in the film is that the benefits of a lot of environmental actions have been felt very inequitably, and that is something that I'm interested in doing, and I invite all of you to join all of us in doing the same thing. You probably already do. I see a lot of nodding heads in here. So I wanted to turn it over. I just want to check on time real quick, how we're doing on time. Okay, yeah, perfect. Okay, so now you've listened to all of us. So we wanted to invite you in the audience to ask questions, share your reflections or reactions about the film that we saw, or ask any one of these fine people a question. And I'm just going to ask one more time, just so we remember who is who and what they're with. It might be helpful for you when you're asking a question. If you can pass the mic and say your name, your first name, and your organization, I think that might be helpful.
I'm Katie with NOACA.
Brian, the shirt speaks for itself, okay? Ohio Poor People's Campaign.
I'm Tracy, but I answer to so many things. I came from a family of 5 kids with Mom's Clean Air Force.
Stephanie, Cleveland Clinic.
Whitney, Ohio City Incorporated.
And so can I just hand this to you to, I don't know how we're doing questions from the audience, actually. She's going to come to you.
Hi, thank you. I'm I'm just going to ask this question because I'm sure I'm not the only one wondering. So I think I moved to, no, I don't think, I know, that's not fair. I moved to Ohio in 2012, and I grew up in California. I'm 32, my fiance is almost 29, and I did not grow up seeing a smoker. I did not, right? I mean, they were hidden in their homes and in their vehicles, but because of the regulations in my home state, no bar, no restaurant, no airport, no school, 50 feet away from any border of any school, college, everything, right? I did not see smokers. I would travel to places like Reno or, parts of Canada and be like, oh my God, and yet he grew up seeing smokers, right, as an Ohioan. Absolutely shocking to me. So, and let alone, I will say one thing Ohioans should know you do really well is that the e-checks are free. We all have to pay like $60 to $80 for our smog checks back home, so that's a big deal. But it really is truly a big deal that the government is paying for that. My question is this, just bare facts, right? Money talks, right? I mean, I've done political organizing, I've done campaigning. We know that there are many things that impact everyone, but when you have it, you don't care to vote for poor folks if you already have access to water, if you already have access to clean air. You are not thinking about the reality that you are factually much closer to, right, than the reality that is out of reach. So my question is, what are the effective lobbies in Columbus that clearly have taken such a wonderful hold over the legislature? Because we know Republicans and Democrats as human beings want clean water, that's great, but that's not how people vote. So what are the actual numbers that people who care need to beat?
How much time you got?
I mean, I just want to know, in Ohio, who are the big players, right, that we need to beat? Because that's all, that's what you got to do.
Part of this is probably a little bit of bias, but the oil and natural gas industry is one of the largest and most effective lobbies that exist in Ohio right now. Plastics, fossil fuel industry, just
the obvious ones.
Those are big ones. The nursing home industry is huge. Nursing home industry, believe it or not, because they want Medicaid reimbursement. And ALEC. Oh.
Well, ALEC is everywhere.
Yeah.
We're the heart of it all, so we have that all here too.
If you look up some of the largest donors to Governor DeWine, they include the concrete and cement industry, as well as Norfolk Southern Railroad, which, we know where that has landed us. Yeah.
So are there numbers for Ohio politicians? The amount they're spending on state legislatures in the state of Ohio, considering, Ohio is pretty populous. It's not, the biggest, but it's there. Are they truly insurmountable? What are the other tools that we can use, right? Because hearts and minds, that's so lovely, that's great, but that doesn't move folks.
I hope you don't mind me calling you Ms. California. We happen to have a couple very excellent think tanks, I guess, that do a lot of excellent work. Center for Community Solutions and Policy Matters are two of the premier ones. If I get your email and stuff, I will send you some of the stuff that I get. Just for clarity of transparency, my day job is I'm a community organizer, but we are as equipped. We're the heart of it all, but we're almost a perfect microcosm of the national and what's going on here in Ohio. And even though our numbers in terms of total population don't necessarily reflect that, our diversity and our demographics are very much a microcosm of the whole United States. So a lot of stuff gets tried out here or comes here that if they can get it off here, they know they can probably get it off nationally, to use the parlance. So.
Thank you for that. And we have a question up here, Daniel, if you don't mind. Would you like the mic? You want to just say it? Okay, go for it.
So, that video is very
Oh, yes, ma'am. Sorry. So that video is very effective. It draws out emotion. And that's not unusual. You watch any documentary about Shamu, it makes you feel, what have you. But as I watched that video, I go, that ain't in Cleveland, right? You don't see Cleveland. You saw Cleveland once, right? My question is there a documentary like that for Northeast Ohio, right? That we could show to people in Northeast Ohio that they would go, oh, that's not in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, or LA, or New York. This is actually going on in Northeast Ohio.
So I just want to clarify your question. Is it that this is great and all, but you don't think that people will identify with it because it's not specific to Cleveland and that would be more powerful?
I'm agreeing with the latter part of your statement, that if there was a documentary that was specific to Northeast Ohio, it would have a greater impact on people who live in Northeast Ohio, because they would say, oh, that's happening down the street. That's happening on the, whatever it may be. That's the question.
Yeah, so I'm going to hand it over to Katie, and I think that's a call to action potentially, right? Is for somebody to make that film if it doesn't already exist.
So we haven't made a film yet, but we do, every year, NOACA produces an air quality trends report. And in that report, we give the data on what we found throughout the 5 counties at the air quality monitors that are not ours, the EPA's, but we report that data and we tell you what that means. So we've started using a COBRA tool from the EPA's COBRA tool in order to quantify the mortality rates, fatality rates, and estimate illnesses and other problems that are caused by the air quality that we're seeing. So we have data. Someone could put that into a multimedia format. But I encourage anyone who's interested in knowing what we're seeing and how it's potentially affecting the residents of Northeast Ohio to take a look at that report and see that so that you can put it in context.
So just to respond to that, people are overwhelmed with numbers. People don't want to read. They are affected by what they see. So I think you're stating that that's a call of action. Should be more than a call of action. It should be a commitment from those organizations in this area who have the funds to be able to retain the folks who can go do a documentary and make that happen. So that's one question. A quick second question. You were talking about the smoking, pulling people in who want to quit smoking. Is there an age discrepancy? Do you see a certain age group that predominates in those who want to stop smoking?
There really isn't an age discrimination or an age over. What we're seeing is a lot of younger people is not actually smoking, so the numbers for younger people is starting to go down. The one concern is the vaping. So we're trying to get that education out because they make vaping so cool with the flavored vapes and that is better than cigarettes or healthier, but to change that narrative to say it's actually worse. I mean, smoking anything is not good, but the vaping is where we try to focus with the younger population. There are patients who just want to, or people who just want to stop smoking across the spectrum because, you know, we see the lung cancers, we see the COPD, we see the asthma, but unfortunately to stop smoking, the reality is there is a lot of other stressors in that person's life. So we have to also think not just to tell people, put that cigarette down. We have to talk to them and really understand what drives them to smoke and what is that stressor that is on them. And that's from very young to very old.
Thank you. So lawn pesticides. Lawn pesticides are the great equalizer. People in the suburbs can destroy the air like the air in the inner city. Those organophosphates that are airborne from those lawn pesticides don't need to be being breathed in by vulnerable people. Imagine those baby carriages going by on the sidewalk innocently past their freshly treated lawns. I'd like to hear your comments on that. Besides destroying the air, it's also destroying the water and the water table. Thank you.
So I wanted to really go back, get to your question in just one moment, sir. Go back to what Mr. JJ was asking about creating a documentary, if one exists, in Cleveland, and that is something that is on our list of things to do with Let's Clear the Air, because we're gathering so much qualitative data and stories from residents in this community. And Sarah, I apologize, I failed to answer the second part of your question, like how can residents get involved when I was talking about Let's Clear the Air? Thanks for your patience. Well, one is I have to give so many, like just a ton of props to our Committee of Champions. We have what's called a Let's Clear the Air Committee of Champions, and this is a resident-based committee at Lakeview that is keeping us informed, guiding the process on what engagement, how they want to be engaged. Coming to the table and speaking with the project partners, with the industries, being a part of the entire process. So not only are they depending on us to follow through and help with this concern in their community, but we're leaning on them to inform how we do this work. So these residents are compensated. They are have been known for years, like since I've been working at Ohio City Inc., and are generally the ones that are the most involved, the most vocal, the most outspoken, and ear to the ground. So very dependable, and we couldn't do this work without them. So I just wanted to throw that out there. There's information on the Ohio City Inc. website. So if you go to lakeviewconnects.com, that is an umbrella project that Lakeview, or Let's Clear the Air, is a part of. So you'll see other activities and projects happening around Lakeview and in Lakeview that are addressing air quality, industrial truck traffic, rerouting the trucks that drive through Lakeview as they should not be, maybe doing something with the shoreway wall that was put up in the 40s after Lakeview was there, that divided them from the rest of Ohio City. And Katie, you were talking to, and I think, I'm sorry, Stephanie, you were also saying that it's fuel emission is a major pollutant that we have to begin to address. So that shoreway wall is a place for tons of cars to travel on a regular basis. We're talking 17,000 or so a day on a regular basis. So just wanted to get to that. We are looking at creating a documentary, so if anyone knows a good production company, please talk to me after the panel. And if,
It's almost inside baseball, so thank you for my colleague at the Poor People's Campaign. But it does.
Thank you, Don, for that question. There are a bunch of environmental pollutants, and while overwhelmingly we know that there's a disparity depending upon how much money you have in your wallet, it is not exclusive to just poor folks or folks that are in rural places and not in the urban places. We are awash in chemicals everywhere. And I just wanted to take the moment to thank Whitney, because Ohio City is one of those, and I live there too, is one of those rare places in this city that all modes of transportation, with the exception of air transportation, all come through that neighborhood. Because we get the big lake-going ships that come down the Cuyahoga, and that area of the environment in terms of regulation of transportation is very, very suspect. And I would be remiss as a peace warrior not to also talk about another aspect of the environment, which is our military-industrial complex in terms of how they adversely affect all of our lives on this planet, and the regulations or lack thereof around that. But you can tell I'm a pastor's kid. I'm starting to preach a little bit, so let me back off.
So I had a question.
Go ahead.
That a couple weeks ago I was at a meeting that was sponsored by the Tree Coalition, and they were talking about how the city's tree canopy has just dramatically gone down. And it's my understanding that trees help with I mean, it's important, obviously, to cut down the emissions, but there's also the opportunity to help clear the air if we have more trees. And so I sort of see that there's different silos where we're talking here about the emissions and they're talking about the trees. And then we have the city planning department that's pushing density and walkable city, which is great, but the city's permitting developments to occur that are wiping out green space. And I just wonder how we can get the different parts of the city to work together so that we don't develop all this new housing where they're putting in, instead of having a big backyard, they're putting in 2 houses and a parking lot in between and taking out all the green space. So I just wondered, I'm not sure which of you is the best one to talk about that.
And what was your name, ma'am? Anita, thank you for that question. So I feel like that's being the representative of the city on the stage. I will take that one. And you exactly described my work. Thank you. So we have a tendency in large organizations of all stripes, not just city government, but every organization I've worked in to work in those silos, right? Because we're asked to specialize and dive deep on things and understand what they are, but then we forget to talk to our neighbor who's doing something that's exactly the opposite of what we're trying to accomplish. So that just describes what the Office of Sustainability is really striving to achieve, is that coordination between all of the, especially on the topics you spoke of, right? There are other organizational departments that, like public health, who's sponsoring all of this, that really see the big picture and how things are all connected. And I think both public health and sustainability have been empowered by the BIB administration to have those conversations across all of the different historic silos in the city. I would say a couple of things that you mentioned in particular, so achieving density and achieving a healthy tree canopy do not have to be at odds with each other, but we do have to figure out how to do it, because right now the way that we do things kind of make them at odds with each other. So that's up to us to really figure that out, and up to, thank you for, are you a resident of Cleveland? Beautiful. Ohio City. Oh man, Ohio City. How many people here live in Ohio City? Oh, okay, all right. Okay, all right, good job. What's that?
Who lives here?
Who lives here in this neighborhood? Oh, very nice. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to take a poll, but I was just wondering if you stacked the crowd. That's all I'm saying. And we just have 2 minutes. Okay. Sorry, we have 3 minutes? Okay, yes. So that's what I would say, Anita, about what we're trying to do at the city in particular. So we are looking at the 15-minute city plans, the complete and green streets plans. We're getting the urban forestry management plans. Some of the grant dollars that are out there will help us advance some of those plans so that we're a little bit more lockstep and we have goals. Sustainability will have goals. We already do have a climate action plan, which you might be aware of, that has goals, but we're updating those this year, and they would cross over a lot of those. So thank you for your question. And somebody else had a question. Is that what you were saying, Brian?
No, I was just saying, the lady from the audience brings up a so-called opposing forces. I'm aware of another one where we would all agree that having access to the lakefront and parks is enhancing to everybody in the city. But there is an issue right now in our city where they want to connect 2 parks together, but in between the 2 parks is a very low-income mobile home community that has been there for decades that has been asked to be displaced. These are the kinds of balancing acts that in my neighborhood OCI is doing a darn good job, but you as the overall person in the city have to balance. Because yes, we used to be called Forest City. That's one of the nicknames, historical nicknames for Cleveland. The fact that we have such a poor tree canopy ought to be embarrassing to everybody who's from here. And the only reason why I know that is because of my grandmother, as I said, 2 generations deep of Cleveland natives. But a lot of cities don't have that. And we started with that, and we can keep that if we want to.
I couldn't agree more. I'm being told that we're done, right? Okay, by Yvette. I will leave it up to Yvette. So thank you for your engagement. You can reach all of us, and afterwards, please come up and ask us questions, if you still have one.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I wanted to take the time to thank our panelists and facilitators for coming to share their knowledge with us about their impacts that they're having on air quality in our city. Can we give our panelists a round of applause? Unfortunately, we cannot compensate you, but we will thank you with our small gift, and we just want to say thank you. And also to Miss Asia Barrett from this beautiful building, St. Martin de Porres, that they allowed us to host this event in, so we have something for her as well. While Abby's passing those out, I just want to shout out the outreach team and tell you a little bit more about what we do. Again, we are the educational branch of my division, and we are in the community. You'll see us tabling at health fairs, different kind of community events, but we are also in your students' classrooms. We can bring messages to your community meetings in your block groups. We can speak on a variety of subjects, including, we have a few school-based programs, Lego workshop, purple air monitors. We speak on environmental justice. And Christina, can you raise your hand? She is the Chief of Air Pollution Outreach, and if you are interested in perhaps showing this film in a smaller setting or a larger setting, and you would like us to come and facilitate that discussion, we'd be open to doing that. And I just also would like to shout out, for the last 12 months since the last event that we had last year, a community conversation, we've been spending a lot of time trying to network, engage other groups that are doing work around smoking cessation, asthma, and other air quality related topics. And so, as Ms. Stephanie stated, she's into smoke-free environments, and so is the health department. It is our goal to try to take our smoking cessation messages to multi-unit housing to help reduce smoking in federally funded housing. And I've been trying to coordinate with the Respiratory Institute, and I also would like to shout them out for providing the refreshments for this night. So thank you for the Respiratory Institute, and we look forward to continuing to build our collaboration. Again, so we are available for tabling, speaking, teaching, and just showing up. And our staff, the outreach, can you just wave your hands? Thank you all so much, because this doesn't happen based on one person. We needed all hands on deck to help promote the event, to share with their family and friends and their networks, and we appreciate all of you. I've seen it posted on some of your sites. We appreciate you sharing that with us, and we just want to say thank you once again. And so I'm going to put it into the hands of, I also wanted to ask if you have any regional activities that you would like to announce today. That's something that's coming up that you would like this group to know about. You can share that with us before we leave, and we'll make sure everybody gets to know about it. Turn it over to you.
All right, I just want to echo the thanks. I want to echo the thanks to our panelists. Thank you for being here, sharing your expertise. Thank you to Director Sarah O'Keefe for being here and moderating today's discussion. Big thanks to St. Martin de Porres for hosting us tonight. This is a fantastic space. And also, again, thank you to Cleveland Clinic for providing the delicious snacks that we had this evening. So as we go and we wrap up today's discussion, what's next? So how often have we all been in a room like this where we talk about the issues, but are we actually going to do something about it? And that's what's always on people's minds. So I want to talk about two different things that we have upcoming that we want to make people aware of, and different ways that we want to hear from you, for you to lend your voice, and for you to help kind of build the programs and services that we have. One is, it's a long time making, but we are currently updating the City of Cleveland Air Pollution Code. We are very lucky as a municipality to actually have localized enforceable air pollution rules. However, they were established in 1977. And when was the Clean Air Act passed? So the Clean Air Act and our local air pollution rules look very similar. We're updating that, and within the next year, or this year, within 23, it's already May, we will be submitting a proposal to hopefully address some of these concerns that were expressed on today's panel discussion. So there will be an opportunity for public comment, and if there's something that you want to share or see in a type of code, then you can reach out to me and we can start trying to get that worked into that initiative. So that's number one. Number two is that we are very fortunate that we are going to be expanding Cleveland's air monitoring network. So we are going to be working on, it'll be announced in June or July, but the Community Leveraged Expanded Air Network Program. So with this program, what we're trying to do is work within the City of Cleveland areas that are currently presenting with poorer health outcomes. And if you can, just based off of panel's discussion today, have a sense of who that is impacting. We've talked a lot about how communities of color are unequally impacted, and that even though we've made strides in the air pollution and that we've reduced that, there's still a lot of work that needs to happen. So we're going to be expanding Cleveland's monitoring network through the use of low-cost sensors and a mobile monitoring unit, but we don't want to dictate where those sensors are going, and we don't want to dictate where that mobile monitoring unit is going. We want to hear from residents about that. So there's two really important ways that residents can get engaged. We will be establishing a resident advisory committee. The resident advisors will be there to inform the project, direct us along the way, identify locations where there are areas of concern for air pollution, and they will work within the community and talk to their neighbors and get the word out about the project. And yes, they will be compensated. And then the second thing is that we will start hosting a series of monthly forums. And the monthly forums, those are an opportunity, again, for us to learn about more specific things that are happening in your community, and then direct our programs and services in a way that is responsive to what's happening within that community. So this can be strategic enforcement of our enforcement activities. It could be the development of our indoor air quality programming. It can be a multitude of things, but we want to make sure that the programs and services that we are offering are actually representative and meet the needs of community members. So if you want to stay engaged with this work, we do have some, just a contact form that you can fill out, and we will get that information out to you as we actually officially launch the project, which will be within the next month or so.
I have some paper forms over here, so
Yep.
you can either take it and scan the QR code, or you can, I don't need it, or you can just fill it out on paper and you can just leave it here. And so we'll get you on our contact list specifically for the Clean and Clee project. And we'll reach out to you once we get those activities started. So those will be right over here if anyone is interested. And we have a lot, so if you know anyone, a neighbor, anyone, you could take some and pass them out as well.
So more to come with that. And again, we want this project, we want it to represent the voice of the residents, and we want it to be reflective of where are their concerns in the community. And then that'll help us with all of our efforts, that'll help us with our enforcement efforts, and that'll even help us with future policy decisions. So as we see, we've discussed a lot today about the narrative, is having this information, having the community involved in this helps to build that narrative. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. I want to, again, give a shout out to our outreach staff. So Ms. Yvette Mitchell, who coordinated tonight's event. Abby Singletary, our wonderful graphic designer, who created our cool logo. David Taylor, another health outreach specialist who is tried and true at all of our events. Daniel Onwuka, who is our newest staff member. He is our newest indoor air quality specialist. And then he's hiding over there, but HRM Anwar is also an enforcement specialist that's on the outreach team. And he's the guy that when you have an air quality concern, he's the one that goes out to investigate what it is. So thank you to our outreach staff, thank you again to our hosts, and thank you again to our panelists.